I'd like to welcome members to this full council meeting here at Victoria Mill and thank our hosts at the unit accommodating us. And first of all, I know it's a very hot evening tonight, so please remove jackets, remove ties, be comfortable. It's been extraordinary temperatures, so we need to get through this meeting as comfortably as possible. Can I ask members of the public not to talk during the meeting, as this can be very distracting for members of the council and others listening to the debate. Can I also ask everyone to ensure any mobile devices are switched to silent and do not cause a distraction during the meeting. I would remind everyone that the use of mobile devices for the taking or making of phone calls is not permitted in the meeting. I would also remind members that they are required to stand when addressing the council meeting if you are able. We are not expecting a fire alarm tonight, but if one should occur, please follow the officers out of the venue to the assembly point, over the canal bridge and in front of the students' accommodation block. The meeting is being streamed, and I would like to welcome those watching on the council's YouTube channel. When members are invited to speak, please wait for a microphone to be brought to you, or if you have a desktop microphone, please press the on button to speak and then off when you have finished. At the rise of the meeting, please exit the lecture theatre row by row. Thank you. Item 1 on the agenda, minutes of the previous meetings of the Annual Council and Appointments Council on the 19th of May 2021. I will move those minutes. Madam Deputy Mayor, will you second those minutes?
I second those minutes, Mr. Mayor.
The minutes are approved. Oh, sorry. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
The minutes are approved. Item 2 on the agenda, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Thank you, Councillor Townley.
Mr. Mayor, can I declare an interest in item 6C? As a parish council member, I do this under other personal interests.
Thank you. Are there any other declarations of interest? Thank you. Item 3 on the agenda, Mayor's communications.
There are none, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Item number 4 on the agenda, public question time.
There are none, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Item 5 on the agenda, notice of motion. Once a proposal has been moved and seconded, members may speak once and for a maximum of 5 minutes. Members may then only speak again on an amendment. A motion has been received which is on your agenda relating to planning reform. Councillor Scott Cunliffe, will you please move the motion?
Okay.
Sorry,
I didn't realise.
I didn't have a desktop one.
Okay, thank you. Okay. I'll just read out the motion, Mayor, if I may. I'm proposing this motion. This council notes the government is proposing a part of planning reforms to remove local residents' rights to object to individual planning applications in their own neighbourhood if the area is zoned for growth or renewal. This council believes that planning works best when the council, developers and the local community work together to shape local areas and deliver, where necessary, new homes and other developments in suitable locations. This council resolves that the CEO will write to the MP for Burnley and the Leader of the House of Commons to urge them to call on the government to protect the rights of communities, to help shape planning policies and to comment, including object to individual planning applications and the details of schemes. Thank you, Mayor.
Second motion, Matt, and reserve the right to speak.
Any member? Councillor Burleson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and could I congratulate Councillor Cunliffe on putting this motion to the council, even though it's only his first real council meeting, and I congratulate him for doing that. And could I support the motion? But could I also bring this motion more locally to Burnley with the local plan? As Councillor Cunliffe has stated in his motion, all these things should be decided at a local level. And at the local plan, discussions were taking place on the issues for flooding. And flooding is an issue in the local plan. So if somebody wants to apply to build a housing estate in a flood zone, then the council would oppose it. But they do not oppose any house being built in areas that actually create the floodplain. Now, we've recently seen in Germany, and only yesterday in China, what happens when there is serious rain. And Germany was a nightmare, 100 odd people killed, most towns literally wiped out. Now, that missed this country by about 140 miles. If that centre of that law had been 140 miles east of where it was, then that could have happened in Burnley. Now, you don't need to be a Harvard University student to realise if water falls on hills, it runs downhill. Now, if the water falls on the hills of Burnley, it runs down into the rivers and falls to the lowest part of Burnley, which invariably is Padiham. It comes down into the River Calder and through Padiham. And we've had in the past flooding in Padiham that we've managed to absolutely sustain. What the local plan is now saying is we won't build on a floodplain, in a flooding area, but we're quite happy to build on a floodplain. We're quite happy to build on the hills around Burnley that soak up the water that comes from the sky in these horrendous storms. Now, I agree with Councillor Cunliffe. This is an issue that we really need to focus on. To build houses on the hills, and I'll refer to two, to build houses at the top of Rossendale Road and to build houses on Glenview Road, which are areas that collect water and it soaks away slowly, is going to give us a big, big problem in the future. And the local plan should be looked at again by our planning officers in the light of what happened in Germany, in the light of what's happened in China, with a view to it not happening here. The rain will fall, the storms will come, and they will fall on the hills around Burnley. The water will fall. It will run downhill. It will go down the rivers and the small streams in Burnley and feed into the Calder. It will then finish up in Padiham and down into the Ribble Valley. We don't want any more serious floods in any parts of our town. So I would ask the council, certainly the executive member for planning, if they will be prepared to look again at the local plan with a view to taking into account the problems that create a flooded area by building over or concreting over the areas that soak up the land that actually stops this happening. And this government's idea of being allowed to put concrete everywhere, build houses anywhere and any time, is a recipe for disaster, and we should oppose it in every way we can. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Every member of the Conservative group in Burnley and Padiham wants to see the local Labour plan, which has angered so many of our residents, reformed. It's become clear to us all that since that plan was passed 3 years ago, it doesn't represent what our residents want to see. Because no matter how many objections come in from members of the public, we councillors are all hindered by the inflexibility of the document. Whether it's a proposed building on the land west of Smithyfield the proposed development near Rosendale Road, or land to the north of Higher Saxfield Street and Standon Hall Drive? The answer is always the same. It is permitted in the local plan, and residents' views ultimately get ignored. Yes, we see objections to these planning decisions come in the form of tinkering in the hope of delay or a reduced number of dwellings. But with the plan, as it currently stands, councillors are effectively rendered useless. That's why we need to make fundamental changes, because the plan for building in our borough is just not fit for purpose, and we need an urgent review. That's what the Conservative group are calling for, and what we will be pushing for in this council. I know that Labour councillors may disagree with the latest coalition, also the Liberal Democrats may do, but it's the right thing to do. Our Member of Parliament, Anthony Higginbotham, shares our view on this issue. He's been a staunch ally of all those who are unhappy with the local plan and has consistently raised this issue in Parliament, speaking up for residents who have contacted him seeking answers. But as members, we know it is ultimately this council that has the ability to make the necessary changes, not our MP. That's why I found the solution put forward tonight by the Green Party as no more than window dressing. I, along with the group, will gladly vote to send Anthony Higginbotham a letter. I'm sure he'll respond in exactly the same way as I just have. That he too wants to see the local Labour plan changed. But to pretend that this is moving the debate forward is fooling no one. Last year, I watched as this council put forward motion after motion, calling for letters to be written to the Conservative MP. And frankly, that's all well and good for those wishing to receive a cream-coloured letter from him, but I, along with the residents in Burnley and Padiham, want to see action taken in changing this plan. The motion also references the changes to planning laws, which were first put forward in the Queen's speech this year. Painting these changes as losing democratic oversight is incorrect. If anything, it will give us a chance to rewrite the plan in a way where it commands the support of the borough. In any case, as it currently stands, we have no democratic oversight. The plan is king. Making planning applications easier and more efficient is no bad thing, but we need a plan which has the full support of the borough in general, not a plan put together by the Labour Party in which we are seeing issue after issue. It goes without saying that we need homes for the future, but would it not be wise to look at our current housing stock before we proceed to build over some of the most beautiful parts of the borough, which have only been chosen as they are more attractive to building contractors? We have approximately 2,500 empty properties in Burnley and Padiham alone. Would it not be sensible to focus on incentivising building contractors to either bring these back into use or replace them with housing stock residents actually want? The old Todmorden Road Primary School is a perfect example of unused brownfield site. This council has sat on their hands with that piece of land for 14 years. And whilst it remains an eyesore for those who live in that area, the Labour Party votes through a plan to build on land on Rosendale Road and land to the west of Smithyfield Avenue. Why? Why extend our urban boundaries without first utilising brownfield sites? I won't deny that the council's made some progress though. The old Baxi site in Padiham and the huge changes we've seen in Burnley Wood, but the plan is just not good enough. Trying to pass this off on the government is disingenuous. It might play to the Green Party's narrative, but it's certainly not the reality. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I want to see the young people in our borough being able to get onto the housing ladder, but I do not want to see us build upon greenfield sites when we have so much brownfield land available to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whittaker. Deputy Mayor, Councillor Townley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I bring this discussion round to the motion in hand? Whilst the plan is a very important part of what we will be discussing, that is for a different meeting. What I would like to say is thank you to Councillor Cunliffe for bringing this motion. However, has he actually read even the summary of the proposed planning for reforms? And I would suggest he goes back, because in fact, within those pages, there is going to be more, further and better and more inclusive community consultation. Consultation itself only works when people collaborate. Now, we know that most people in this borough do not take part in those consultations. So whilst we will be supporting this motion, I would ask him it is the wrong motion at the wrong time with a wrong political message.
Thank you, Councillor Townley. Councillor Anwar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, just to completely agree with the Deputy Mayor in that, having listened to the motion and also having read the motion, I don't think it's about actually the local plan. That's not what today's discussion is about. And I think it's worth reminding all colleagues as well that the local plan is not a Labour Party plan. It was voted for in the council chamber. It is a Burnley local plan. It's important that we remember that as well. And it's interesting that the Conservative colleagues are talking about that they don't agree with the local plan, but what I would suggest to them is that they actually listen to what's coming out of central government with regards to local plans and what's on the agenda there. In terms of coming back to the motion itself, what I would like to say is that what it's asking for is that local communities, as Councillor Townley just said, that local communities need to have a say in any developments that take place in their local communities, and we fully support that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Anwar. Councillor
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I think I'll partially build on the back of what the Deputy Mayor said, added some figures behind that to try and add some context to what she's suggesting. I mean, the first paragraph about the planning reforms, I mean, really, it's just harped up hysteria, really. I mean, at the minute, these reforms will be the first sort of reforms of that scale since about 1947. Of course, that was very different times back then. At the minute, especially large developments, could take up to 7 years to get through the process, which of course is incredibly bureaucratic and sluggish. And also, which is another part of that reforms, which I'm sure the Green Party might be interested in. 30 years ago, small developers accounted for about 40% of new housing, whereas only now 12%. I mean, the reforms are trying to help these small, essentially the small guys in the industry, which I'm pretty sure the Green Party will be champions for, like ourselves. Councillor Townley mentioned that there's a very low take-up in consultation with planning applications. Nationally, about average, about 1 to 3% of residents actually put in things to the council about local planning applications. These reforms are aiming at substantially increasing that by the depth and brevity, as my colleague suggested. Of course, I know we've mentioned that this isn't about the local plan, which it isn't about the local plan, but I do think it is a reaction to the local plan in one sense. As it mentions, I think the main gist of why this motion came forward is the fact we're building on green belt, such as the likes of Red Leeds Road and potentially near Lindsay Park in the near future, possibly. Well, if that's such a case, I mean, this motion isn't really going to add much to the table, really. I mean, you might get a nice, lovely bit of parliamentary stationery back, and trust me, it is quite nice. I've received a few myself. But at the end of the day, bigger questions need to be asked, really, about what's going on with this local plan, which this motion no doubt will eventually lead to. But really, I mean, in my time here in council, I've found there's been quite a lot of us and them when it comes to between the council and central government, particularly. And we've seen with the Towns Fund and the COVID grants what can happen when the council and the central government and county council really work together. They can achieve quite great things, really. And I think that needs to be the case with these planning reforms. Of course, I mean, I will not stop anybody writing to Anthony. I mean, Anthony relishes receiving communications from his residents to know what really matters to his constituents, of course, you know, and I'm sure he'll agree with me with that. But to reiterate my colleagues, I mean, we want to deliver to our residents That starts in this council. It doesn't start with just writing letters to central government. It happens in here. Well, not specifically in here, but the town hall, of course. So to finalise, really, we need to deliver for our people and protect our green belt as much as we can, really. And I think, even though we are supporting this motion tonight, I don't really agree with paragraph 1 because I believe that's just hysteria. And the third paragraph being writing a letter, which is fine. That can be the first step. But I don't think it's quite going to cut the arse, really, in my opinion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks.
Councillor Oscar, you did indicate you want to speak, yeah. Can you please stand up, Councillor Oscar?
Councillor Hanwell made a point that, thank you, that the Labour Party didn't vote for this on the one. Let me stand you corrected. You had the upper hand. You had all the majority. We didn't have the majority. You had the majority. I, along with many others, voted against this local plan. We never wanted it. We had it forced on us. We are a controlled council. That's what we had forced on us. You also find that the members of the public don't like it, the group don't like it, and we'll be pushing to get it changed. The Conservative want to see it changed, and we're going to focus on this fully. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Oscar. Councillor Fewings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Some of the responses to this motion are just a little bit strange when you read the words, and I'm really glad that Councillor Cunliffe read it out, because the people at home would have been wondering what on earth are they talking about if they'd been reading it on the screen. And then we had these speeches from wannabe Westminster politicians. Let's focus on the wording at hand. This is a motion that you all stood up and agreed with, and you've just taken the most amazing amount of time not agreeing with something you're going to vote for. I'm going to try and keep it brief to move on, but I just want to pick up on the point that writing to the MP, Anthony Higginbotham, won't achieve anything. I think many residents realise that is the case. But what I would like people to do is focus on the fact that planning reforms are happening. This motion does not say that reforms are not needed. It says in those reforms, let's make sure the voices of local residents are heard. That's why you're all voting for it. Let's just move on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I first of all thank Councillor Townley, the Deputy Mayor, for bringing some professionalism into this debate. I think if you look at what her colleagues have said, it's absolutely got nothing to do with the motion. But what I will say, in view of the fact that, if you like, accusations have been thrown out at the Labour group and the so-called Labour local plan, residents are against it, etc. Just two things I'd like to point out. When you look at all the new homes what have been built just recently in Burnley, when I look at the home where I live in, a Greenfield site, when I'm looking around this room now, a number of councillors live on former Greenfield sites. I think we should remember that and have a bit of humility about us. And just one final figure on this very quickly, and people might not realise this, but between 2012 and 2020, Burnley surpassed its new home delivery target by completing 1,625 dwellings. Of the homes that were completed, 96% of them were previously developed on brownfield land. And maybe that's something for everybody to think about. The brownfield sites included the converted apartments, empty homes brought back into use, places like Perseverance Mill and other areas. So just please move away from this myth, what you keep spreading down town, that Burnley's local plan is all about building on greenfield sites. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Harper. I don't see any other members. So, Councillor Cunliffe, you have the right of reply. Okay, thank you, Councillor Cunliffe. We move to the vote. Can all those in favour please show? Those against? Okay. The item is carried. Thank you. At this point, I understand that Councillor Scott Cunliffe will move a motion without notice under Council Procedure Rule 13M to suspend standing orders, to request that a motion be considered on anti-racism. This suspension motion and an updated version have been circulated to members, and hard copies are being distributed now. Just wait for a second whilst those copies are distributed, and then we'll move to procedure of moving the motion. Councillor Lishman, can we have one meeting, please? I was waiting for the meeting. Sorry, Mr. Mayor. Hopefully everybody's got a copy of the motion now. Councillor Conley, can you please move the motion?
Mayor, thank you. Feels like I'm taking up all this space today. I won't apologise for that because I feel it's an issue that's close to my heart, but I'll move quickly through. I'd like to move a motion without notice under Council Procedure Rule 13M to suspend Council Procedure Rule CPR 11, motion with notice, to our motion on anti-racism to be considered at this meeting. As we all know, thousands of racist comments were aimed at black England players were posted online after the Euros 2020 final on Sunday, the 11th of July 2021, with an online petition going live the following day. This did not allow time for a motion to be approved and submitted before the 7 working days deadline under procedures. It's imperative that this motion is brought to today's full council meeting so it can be passed before the start of the English Premier League season on the 14th of August. I think it's actually the 13th Friday night, but there it's 14th of August on a Saturday when Burnley first play. Delaying this motion to the next full council meeting at the end of September 2021 would miss an important opportunity to make a strong statement before our town's Premier League team starts the season with a full stadium of fans. Would you like me to read the motion, Mayor? I'm not unsure. I'm a bit unsure if I should read the motion or I think that's...
I think it would be helpful if you did read the motion.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, no.
Because I've read the motion to suspend. I don't know if I have to read the actual motion that I'm hoping to push if the suspension is agreed to.
I don't think we need to read the actual motion because I think this is about the suspension in the first place and you have outlined the reasons why you want the suspension. So I think that's sufficient.
I think the motion's in everyone's hands to read, yeah. Thank you.
Is the motion without notice under Council Procedure Rule 13M to suspend Council Procedure Rule 11, seconded. Thank you, Councillor Wright. Now remember, we're discussing the suspension, so nothing else at this stage. So any member on the suspension? Got Councillor Anwar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sure every single person in this chamber, when they saw the racist abuse that some of the England footballers were subjected to after that European game, I'm sure every single person in this chamber was disgusted by that. But I think by suspending standing orders, what we're doing is setting a really dangerous precedent in that motions can be brought to this council, and what we'd be effectively doing is tearing up the Constitution, and the Constitution and the standing orders are there for us to follow. With regards to this motion, I think, and the other thing is that, you know, the discussion is around Burnley Football Club as part of this. We're not sure what quite their stance is, we're not quite sure what their policies are, and to be discussing in this chamber something about the football club when we don't know what their position is, I think that would be totally unfair. And so I think that from our group point of view, we can't support the suspension of standing orders, and we will not be supporting that just because we can't set a dangerous precedent going forward. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Anwar. Councillor Ferrier.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, I mean, I do have some sympathy for the contents of the motion, because racism absolutely makes me sick, unbelievably. But at the end of the day, we are talking about suspension of council procedures here in a minute. And quite frankly, I mean, I could agree with my colleague over there, the fellow councillor just spoke previous. At the end of the day, council procedures and the Constitution are there for a reason. End of the day, you know. I think for over the last couple of years, for one reason or another, I think we've been a little bit too blasé about suspending the council procedures. I think we need to go back to make it where we only suspend council procedure in absolute emergencies, where there's perhaps legal ramifications if we didn't, like setting the budget, for example. So really, I mean, I know the Premier League would have started by the time the next full council goes, but it won't be that too deeply into it, really. So it's still time to have an effective discussion on the content of the motion at that next full council. And it gives time for the Burnley Football Club to come back and maybe add something to it. Any other institutions involved, they can add something to it. And it gives time for councillors to look it over and have a think and come back with something good and meaningful, maybe some additions to it. But at the end of the day, we can't, I think I can speak on behalf of my party, really, our group, cannot support the suspension of council motions in this case, because it's not really an emergency where there's legal ramifications if we don't. I think it can wait a bit until the next full council, really. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ferrier. Councillor Fewings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Disappointed to hear that we're not going to be suspending standing orders because it's going to set a precedent. Might want to look up the word precedent after the meeting. We suspended standing orders for a motion not less than 12 months ago, and on many, many council meetings when we've been unable to fit the agenda into the time set for the meeting, standing orders is suspended willy-nilly. So I really don't think the argument that it sets a precedent is a strong argument at all. I look forward to, if this meeting gets to 9:30, and I make the point that extending by suspending standing orders would disproportionately affect parents, women and disabled people, that you're all back my point and not suspend standing orders. We really need to hear this motion. And essentially, if we don't suspend standing orders today, we'll have no alternative than to call an EGM so we can discuss the motion. This is a really important issue. So neither of those situations are ideal, but opposition to racism is more important than that, and it's more important than red tape. So let's hear the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor James. Deputy Mayor, Councillor Townley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to make a point, that the reason we've had to suspend standing orders so often is often at the behest of, or because of Councillor Fewings, who, instead of saying one word, has to make a whole meal of it. We are discussing the Constitution here. There is a reason for the Constitution. It is very disrespectful, I have to say, to try and bring these things. Also, it shows your complete lack of transparency. If you have to call an EGM, an emergency meeting, please do. But on this matter, I think you can say everybody in this room goes along with the feeling of we are all anti-racist, but you have actually maligned one of our greatest institutions of this town without even bothering to look what their constitution says about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Khan. Lord Wajid Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It does feel like from UCLan, last time I was in this room was when I was invigilating exams, and nothing's changed by the outlook, although it looks like all the clever ones are at the front and all the naughty ones are at the back. Mr. Mayor, I just want to say absolutely agree with the context of this motion, but having been racially abused for many years of my life as I grew up to where I am now, I think it's important that we don't rush this through. And I totally agree with the context, the words of this motion. I understand its importance, but I do say to my fellow council member Fewings that there will be time to have this motion will have full support, I'm pretty convinced. But today we are trying to suspend standing orders, which is a different matter when we're trying to suspend it to get the meeting on the business finished for the meeting and to get motions through. Otherwise we'll get every other meeting people trying to suspend the council order, standing orders and get motions through. And there's so many issues that many members in this group are passionate about. But today, I think it's not about just precedence. I think it's about principle of making sure we get these motions put through with clear debate across the whole chamber or lecture theatre or whatever you want to call it nowadays. So I think I agree with that, my colleague, Councillor Anwar. Let's not use this procedure to get this motion through. Let's have a proper debate, a comprehensive debate, and let's get a number of colleagues in this chamber to contribute to that debate when you move your motion. And I assure you I'll be fully supporting your motion whenever it comes, but it has to come at the right time.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. I haven't got any more indications of wishing to speak on the suspension motion. Councillor Cunliffe, you have the right to reply.
Normal comment, really, Mr. Mayor. It's interesting to hear all comments, and thank you to the groups that responded to me when I reached out to them prior to this. It's a learning lesson, and it's also one that I feel strongly about, and I really hope that we can suspend the motions and hear it right here and right now. I understand the concerns about precedent, and I agree with Councillor Fewings. It's been broken before, but I think I did lay out that there was very little time on this, and we've reacted to an incident none of us could have really predicted 90 minutes earlier. There was a really good feeling in the country and in the town about football and some unity and diversity that was happening for us all. So I really do think that it is a decent time to discuss it, and I think it'd be good to get there before the football season starts. And I think it's building on the good work that Burnley Football Club has done. I've been into the club today, speaking to some colleagues in the club today, and there's a lot to be done. There's a lot that's being done, and it's under new ownership, so I think it's a strong message that could go out to the club and the FA to all work together going forward. So I hope we'll support the suspension. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cunliffe. Okay, to the vote. All those in favour of the suspension of Council Procedure Rule 11, which would allow consideration of the anti-racism motion at this meeting, please show. All those against? The item is not carried. Thank you. Okay, item number 6 on the agenda, items for decision by the Council. Can I point out to members that items for decision by Council are treated as motions. Once a proposal has been moved and seconded, members may speak once and for a maximum of 5 minutes. Members may then only speak again on an amendment. Will members please note that the relevant minute extracts from the 14th of July 2021 executive meeting relating to items 6B, C, D, E and item 11 have been published on members' iPads as a supplementary to the agenda pack, and the relevant decisions for full council have been highlighted in bold in each minute. Item 6A, Parliamentary Boundary Review 2023. Councillor Afraziab Anwar, will you move a recommendation from the report?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move a recommendation. In doing so, I'd just like to say a few words with regards to this item, and it's in relation, obviously, to the Parliamentary Boundary Review. And I'm sure all colleagues will have seen the report that's come out from the Boundary Commission. And what it's effectively doing is taking away 2 of our wards and sticking them with Pendle, and effectively what we're being given or offered is parts of Bacup and Whitworth as part of our parliamentary constituency. And one of the things that comes out, that stands out from that, we as a community, but also in terms of from a geography point of view, do not have any connections or things in common with Bacup or that part of Rosendale. And in terms of whether we will agree in this chamber on what the right thing to do is with regards to this report, or what a recommendation would be, I don't think that all groups are going to come to a decision, are going to agree on anything on that. So what I would like to do is move that this council writes to the Boundary Commission and move that we go for option B, which is to oppose the recommendations of that Boundary Commission report. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Anwar. Councillor Susan, will you second the recommendation from the report?
Mr. Mayor, I second recommendation B.
Thank you. Any member? Councillor Lishman.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's worth, when we look at this, thinking about the context and how we've got ourselves into this position, because that might affect what we do next if we follow the recommendation that Councillor Anwar has made, with which I wholly agree. The reason we are in this position is because of one simple number put by government now a decade ago into its instructions to the Boundary Commission. That number was 5%. What the Boundary Commission has to do, apart from a few offshore islands, is ensure that every parliamentary constituency has within 5% of the total number of electors of the average. What that means is that we are destroying, not only in Burnley, but throughout the rest of the country, the sense of community which ought to underpin the role of a Member of Parliament. We are now going to be seeing Members of Parliament who are representing an area with 3 local authorities within it. Some of those will be only small parts of local authorities. What will be happening is that the members of Parliament trying to represent those areas will in fact be representing only part of them. What will also happen, going back to the discussion we had earlier about writing to the Member of Parliament, is that we will be writing to different Members of Parliament about different things and hoping that they pay attention to us. We've got quite a long history in Burnley of a constituency boundary which is the same as the boundary of the parliamentary constituency. That's very helpful in terms of being represented by a Member of Parliament, as Councillor Birtwistle was a good example, who can stand for the whole of that community. We're going to destroy that. We're going to undermine it. It is difficult to see anything in this and that insistence on a low percentage rather than on the importance of community, other than a direct recognition by government that it wants to destroy the strength of that community link between local people and a local authority and their parliamentary representative. As we might consider later when we look at the question of so-called levelling up, what is happening is that central government takes more and more direct power, more and more direct control, and by breaking the link between this and other local authorities and their Member of Parliament, what they will do is undermine local democracy ever further. The problem with the 5% figure, and I've actually tried doing this, is that the boundaries you end up with depend on where they start in the region. If you start in southwest Cheshire, or if you start in Carlisle, you have with every decision that you make to get within that 5%. And what that does is ensure that if you happen to be at one of the further ends of the region from where they started, you are left with very little choice. What I would suggest, therefore, is that in agreeing recommendation B, what we do is ask our officers, with their slide rules, to work out the alternatives. The changes in Burnley wouldn't necessarily be too difficult. Looking at numbers rather than Bacup, you could keep Burnley together, you could think about adding Symonston and Reed or Fence and Higham, which are very much naturally part of our area. The problem is, what then happens to Bacup? Because what is happening to Bacup is dependent on what they're doing in Darwin and Greater Blackburn with those proposals. So what we need to do, if we're going to have any purchase in this argument, is to argue for a sub-regional answer which produces boundaries which meet the criteria which the Boundary Commission have and which provide an alternative which enables us to maintain the integrity of our town and our parliamentary constituency.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Collis. Sorry, Councillor. Yeah, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I note Councillor Lishman's point that we have in Burnley for a long time had the same boundaries for the parliamentary constituency and the borough. That's quite true, and in some ways it is helpful, but I think he exaggerates the extent to which it is helping. And in any event, that is not a situation that most of the country enjoys. If you look at, for example, where I grew up in Todmorden, they are part of Calderdale MBC, at council level, and the parliamentary constituency, that council covers two parliamentary constituencies, Calder Valley and Halifax, with obviously two different MPs. And you could never have a situation where most councils and most constituencies married up because there's just too big a difference in size. And I think he's sort of scuttling over the problem that we have at present with the disparity in sizes between constituencies that's grown up. That in itself is a democratic deficit because it means, you know, people in, for example, the Isle of Wight, where they have over 100,000 people are electing one MP, and people in Rossendale, where they have 60-odd thousand, are also electing one MP, which is the whole point of why this process is going forwards. He mentioned that it was in some way destroying communities because Burnley, you know, is a cohesive sort of society on its own. But then he slightly contradicts that by saying that there are places like Fens and Higham that are outside the current constituency boundaries that are naturally a part of Burnley. So both of those things can't be true. However you tinker with the boundaries, there are going to be people that feel slightly left out by it or slightly annoyed by it. But one way or another, they've got to be altered to make it fair for everyone. And for that reason, I would ask that the council back option 2A. Thank you.
At this moment in time, because actually recommendation B has been moved and seconded, so we'd be voting on that motion first. If that obviously falls, then I'm not sure where we go after that. But we do have a mover and seconder, so we have to go through that process first. Okay. Councillor Townley, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Lishman. I do enjoy listening to you. I always learn something. However, I do wonder whether we would be trying to put forward ideas about this if it had remained as Accrington and Burnley North, Accrington and Burnley South. So really, saying that Burnley will lose its integrity because it is joined to Bacup doesn't hold water. And likewise, I have to say that we will never lose the integrity of the borough. We are talking about the parliamentary constituency. That is, in my mind, a completely different level of thinking and a completely different level of voting for each and every one, both in this chamber and outside in the borough. Therefore, if we stick to the point, we will not lose Burnley and its communities. We will be as strong as ever. All we're doing is evening up in numbers, and we have to join with someone. For us, of course, Bacup would be the one we would prefer to, because actually coming from the rural part of Burnley, I have to say that we have felt disenfranchised for many, many years. So really, when you speak about losing communities, you've already lost some of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Townley. Councillor Ferrier.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. This is the first I've done this, but can I raise a point of order, please, Mr. Mayor, regarding the vote of these options on this particular item? You said about the proposal second of item B, but I'm just curious from the council officers why they're not going down the avenue of voting for A or B or C. As I figured reading this agenda previously, that's where we would have gone. And we have done that for previous items previously. And just hoping the office member to offer some advice on that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
This is not an officer recommendation. Basically, it's a series of options based on a report that's just come to this council for consideration. Now, Councillor Anwar and Councillor Graham have moved option B. As is right, I think under Constitution I'll be corrected, but amendments can be made to what's been proposed and seconded. I haven't heard an amendment yet. And if anybody can come up with one, then obviously it would be considered. But at the moment, we don't. We just have a mover and a seconder for option B. And monitoring officer would like to just say a few words.
Councillor Mayor, just to clarify, in 2016 we had a similar report with options. The reason we've got options within the report, naturally this debate can get political and officers can't be involved in political debate. That's why we've given options for members to consider today.
Can I?
You can only speak once. It has to be a point of order, and you will need to refer to a council procedure rule, Deputy Mayor.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. I wish to ask a question of the monitoring officer.
I'll accept that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I could ask the monitoring officer, as Councillor Commis actually began to put a proposal forward, which was not seconded at the time. Will that stand if a seconder comes forward?
No, because the motion was already put forward by Councillor Anwar, seconded by Councillor Graham. So we have to take that motion first. If that motion was to fail, then we can revisit. And that's what Mr. Mayor was trying to clarify earlier.
Okay, any other member? Councillor Ingham?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As a new councillor, I'm just a little confused and would like some clarity. So we have the options of A, B, C. Only B was proposed, no discussion on that. So where does that leave us? So option B is the only one on the table. We're not going to discuss the others unless option B doesn't carry. Is that what we're saying? Sorry if I'm kind of being improper, but as a new councillor, I just really need this ratifying, please. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any other member on the motion that has been moved and seconded for option B? No. Okay, we shall move to the vote. All those in favour, please show. All those against? The item is carried. Option B. Item 6B, Platinum Jubilee 2022 and Armed Forces Day 2022. Councillor Afrasiab Anwar, will you please move the report?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move the report, and in doing so, again, just to say a few words about the contents of the report. I think after the 12 or 18 months or so that we've had with the pandemic, I think every single one of us in our communities and our residents deserve cause for a celebration, and what this offers, the Platinum Jubilee celebrations offers for our communities to be able to take part in some sort of a celebration to celebrate Her Majesty's Platinum Jubilee. And also as part of that, I think it's important that we, as a council, as a town, recognise the contributions of residents from this town and people from this town who've made contributions to the armed forces as well, and those from all different backgrounds. So I think it's important, and I take pleasure in moving this report. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Anwar. Councillor B. Foster, will you second the report?
I'll second that report.
Any member? Sorry, lost the name. Councillor Chamberlain. Apologies. Councillor Chamberlain.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As most members will know, I'm an extremely proud veteran, and I do work extensively within the community. Most of the veterans have missed out on some extremely important things to us over the last couple of years because of the COVID virus, and I fully endorse the motion. We need to have a massive celebration for the Armed Forces Network. A lot of the veterans are currently suffering, as many residents are as well, particularly with PTSD, because the lockdown has brought that really to the fore for them. So have something to look forward to is vital. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Chamberlain, Councillor Fewings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move an amendment to this motion, which I'm sure officers will circulate. But before that happens, I just want to say a few words, particularly for the people who might be watching at home or in the public gallery, because the motion is just basically 2 sentences. So just to be very clear what the actual motion says, because I think we tripped up over that earlier. The full council be recommended to establish a budget of £20,000 from revenue support reserves for the Platinum Jubilee celebrations and an Armed Forces Day event to be held in summer 2022. So it doesn't say let's all have a big party after COVID. It says let's take £20,000 from reserves and put it in a ring-fence fund for those 2 things. Now, 70 years on the throne is an incredible achievement, and you know I like a cucumber sandwich and a glass of Pimm's as much as the next Brit. But that is the sort of thing that is usually done as a community, people coming together. And I think what we really should be doing is supporting local communities that might want to hold street parties and might want to close roads. And those things are technical, and they would probably benefit better for some help with that than they would with some money, because people essentially are quite happy usually to chip in. So what I am proposing as a motion, the amendment to the motion, is really to link back to the report, which is that there would be £10,000 for each of these things, not a £20,000 budget. And so my amendment, which is Amendment A when it's circulated, is really to say that we should be supporting local communities who want to have crowdfunders, share that on social media, help them raise the funds themselves, and to a more permanent mark of Queen Elizabeth's reign for 70 years would be to plant 70 mature trees in the borough, because that will last much longer than a cucumber sandwich. So I think what you'll see when it comes round is that we're suggesting, rather than take money out of the reserves, which is talking about setting precedents, is something that we really shouldn't just be doing for the sake of it. We would take the element for marking the Queen's Jubilee with 70 mature trees in the borough, which could be a really great community spirit where people choose the sites and come together and have something much more lasting. And we could fund that out of the climate emergency budget, because obviously planting trees is really important. So that way we're not taking money out of our reserves, which, if anyone's ever tried to get anything done in this council, they know that the response is, we have no money. So I don't know where the magic money tree has now come from, but let's be clear. You can mark this event, you can celebrate the Queen's Jubilee, but you don't have to take money out of reserves, and that is the thrust of the motion. Anyone that says the amendment says anything else is, incorrect.
Thank you. So, as we move, we have a seconder for that amendment. Okay, just to be clear for everybody, and including those who are watching remotely, the amendments, the full motion as proposed through Councillor Fewings would read as following. The full council be recommended to establish a budget of £20,000, comprising of £10,000 from 1, the climate change budget, and 2, £10,000 from the revenue support reserve, to be used, in the case of 1, for the sole purpose of planting trees to provide a long-lasting marking of the Platinum Jubilee celebrations, whilst tackling the climate and ecological emergency, and recommends to the Executive that it uses these funds to purchase 70 mature trees to be planted across the borough, and B, authorises officers to use a reasonable amount of time to assist residents, groups and parish councils in setting up crowdfunders for any celebrations they plan to hold, including sharing those crowdfunders on the council website, council social media, and assistance with issuing a press release to local papers about funding appeals if needed. And in the case of 2, for an Armed Forces Day event to be held in the summer of 2022. Okay, what I propose, and I move that we adjourn for 10 minutes to consider. Madam Deputy Mayor, can you second that?
I second that.
Will all those in favour of an adjournment please show? Sorry. Okay, any member on the proposal to adjourn?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to make it very clear for everyone in the chamber and those at home that there is a second amendment to this motion, which is on the same piece of paper. I suggest you have a read of that as well, so we can ensure a much more flowing, council meeting. But obviously that has not been moved yet, so it is on your papers, and I'll support the adjournment.
I don't want to confuse everybody, but council procedure rules do dictate that we consider one amendment at a time. And if it means that we have to come back to it, we will come back to it. So let's not confuse amendments.
Point of personal explanation. I didn't say let's consider 2 amendments at the same time. I said you have both sets of wording on the same piece of paper, so just be cognizant of that.
We heard you, Councillor Fewings, and I think I explained it perfectly reasonably to members. Okay, can all those in favour of an adjournment for 10 minutes to consider the amendment please show? Thank you, that is carried. We are adjourned for 10 minutes. Okay, the amendment has been moved and seconded. Any member? Councillor Anwar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I'd just like to say that it's ironic that Councillor Fewings is always complaining about not getting home on time and yet sticks in amendment after amendment and stops us from getting through council business. With regards to the report itself, the report, if you'd read it, makes it absolutely clear what the funding is being set aside for. If community residents associations, if members of the public want to fundraise as an aside, in addition to the funding that we'll put aside for this, they're more than welcome to do that. With regards to the armed forces and the funding that we'll be putting aside for that, again, if there's other fundraising that needs to take place, organisations and from the local communities can get involved in that. That's absolutely fine. With regards to the Platinum Jubilee tree planting, there is a national scheme underway which we're part of. Since the millennium, we've in the borough we've planted more than 1 million trees. But with regards to the trees and the planting that the amendment is being made, that is something that can be looked at afterwards, and we can work alongside different groups and different members, colleagues, to address that. But this is about the motion itself. This is about a project that we want to get underway, which I'm sure all colleagues in this chamber agree that there is a cause for celebration for local community organisations, residents associations to come together, especially after the 18 months or so that we've had. And I don't think, having heard from Councillor Chamberlain, I don't think anybody would not want to celebrate the achievements and contributions of our armed forces and veterans and the contributions that they've made. So we will not be voting for this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Anwar. I've got Deputy Mayor Councillor Townley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can we move to the vote, please?
A motion to go straight to the vote has been moved. Is that seconded? Any member? It's on the motion to go straight to the vote. Okay, we'll go straight to the vote on the amendment. Sorry, Councillor Fewings has the right of reply first, so please go ahead, Councillor Fewings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm pleased to see that we're going to the vote rather than having 5 members of the Conservative Party stand up and give a speech. I think that what we really need to do here is go back to when I proposed the motion and said, please read it. Councillor Anwar has not done that. He talked about the armed forces. There's no amendment in Amendment A that does anything about the armed forces. So again, just a speech. Let's move to the vote. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Councillor Hosker, we're going straight to the vote now. Councillor Fewings had the right of reply. So can all those in favour of the amendment please show? Okay, all those against? The amendment is not carried. We now go back to the original motion as moved. Any member? Councillor Lishman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is on? Yes. Simply to say I'm delighted to see this motion go forward, both elements of it. I think the proposals within the paper are excellent. I know that there are going to be lots of trees planted across the country, and I know that central government and also lots of community groups will be suggesting planting their own as well, which will be an added bonus for the town, as well as all the planting that I'm sure we as a council will consider. The idea of having an event or to support people having their own events, their own street parties, which is what is indicated within the report, is an excellent way forward and will add to the funding that people will do themselves in order to make this event, the Queen's Platinum Jubilee and the Armed Forces Days, very special events. I'm very happy with the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Townley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I fully agree with Councillor Lishman and would like the Chamber to know that work has been carrying on throughout the pandemic for certainly the event in Townley Park, and everybody is going to be contacted and will be asked to be part of that, of course. We are again looking at our tree estate across the whole of the borough, and that is to be looked forward to as it grows, and I would therefore move to the vote.
The motion has been proposed to move to the vote. Well, I'm sorry, Councillor Hall, I didn't see it before Councillor Townley, so I apologise for that. It has been moved that we proceed to the vote. Is that seconded? Okay, that's clear that it's been seconded. Okay, we move to the vote. All those in favour of the motion as proposed by... Okay, all those in favour of moving straight to the vote, please show. All those against? It's carried that we move straight to the vote. So, going back to the original motion as moved by Councillor Anwar and seconded by Councillor Foster, can all those in favour please show? All those against? That's carried. Thank you. Item 6C, 2020-21 Final Revenue Outturn Report. Councillor Sue Graham, will you please move the report?
Thank you. I move the report and it has been through the executive. The executive minute is there before you. So I move the report. Thank you.
Councillor Anwar, will you second the report?
I second the report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any member? No, okay. Councillor Lishman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to say thank you to the officers and to anybody who's given us money so that we've arrived in a situation completely different to that which we were last September, where people will recall we were some millions short of the mark. And to actually have officers who've been able to work through the pandemic and to achieve an arrangement whereby we're 31,000 in credit, our thanks and gratefulness of the people of Burnley should be paid to those officers. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. We'll move to the vote. Can all those in favour please show? All those against, please show. The item is carried. Item 6D, 2020-21 final capital outturn position. Councillor Sue Graham, will you move the report?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd also like to join Councillor Lishman in thanking the officers. I mean, if you look at this capital outturn position, we've spent 87% of our capital budget this year, and I'm quite surprised that we've managed to do that. But it's been a very difficult year, and yet we've invested in improvements in parks, in Lower St James's Street, and bringing more empty homes into use. So despite the pandemic, we still have carried on meeting our targets. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Anwar, will you please second the report?
I second the report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any member? Councillor Townley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe that was a vote for the government there, if we're in credit. Thank you very much from all of you. We'll pass that on to our MP, who will be highly delighted to make that known in the House of Commons.
Thank you. No other members, so we'll move to the vote. All those in favour, please show. Okay. All those against, please show. The item is carried. Item 6E, Annual Treasury Management Report, Review of 2020-21. Councillor Sue Graham, will you move the report?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move the report. The Annual Treasury Report, Management Report, makes very interesting reading, but I've got no further comments at this stage. Thank you.
Councillor Anwar, will you second the report?
I second the report, Mr. Mayor.
Any member? Councillor Ferrier.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Definitely on 6E, I want to double check. Definitely 6E, that's right. It's a really tiny point, really. It's not going to sway our vote for it tonight, but on 66, 67, it goes on about our main bank we use for the investment banking is HSBC, and it's more something I think the officers just to bear in mind is that considering how they've been treating some of them pro-democracy demonstrators in Hong Kong and the BNO passport holders that moved to this country under the government scheme, that freezing accounts, pension accounts, etc. I think the officers need to question this council needs to question whether is it morally correct sometimes to continue a bank that's been treating people like this. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any other member? Councillor Graham, right of reply.
Thank you. I do appreciate what the Councillor Ferrier said, and I do to a certain extent agree with him, but I'd like to find a bank or biggest financial establishment that hasn't got some record of bad publicity. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now move to the vote. All those in favour, please show. All those against, please show. The item is carried. Item 6F, constitutional updates. Councillor Fraser Vanwar, will you move the report?
I move the report, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Sue Graham, will you second the report?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I second the report.
Any member? Councillor Chamberlain?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In the report, it's given a budget for the holiday activities fund for food. Now, I live in a ward where one of the community centres is currently closed, and we want to see it opened as fast as possible. Because last time the holiday food activities fund was done, we had a large uptake of residents who used it, and they'd like to be able to provide it again for them. At the moment, with that community centre shut, we're unable to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. No other members? Now go to the vote. All those in favour, please show. All those against, please show. The item is carried. Item 6G, appointments to committees, working groups and outside bodies 2021-22. The committee appointments in the reports for the Council's Licensing Committee and Audit and Standards Committee are uncontested by convention. Also, the nominations from Labour Group for the appointments to the outside body LCC Health Scrutiny Committee are also currently uncontested. There are also currently 2 nominations for Pennine Prospects for 1 place, and so this appointment will be contested and this will be dealt with later. Councillor Frazier Banwar, will you move the uncontested appointments as set out in the report relating to Licensing Committee, Councillor Cant, Audit and Standards Committee, Gil Smith, Stuart Armfields, Pat Higginbottom and Usman Khan, and LCC Health Scrutiny Committee, Councillor Cant as lead, Councillor Shabana Khan as substitute. Councillor, yeah.
I move, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Sue Graham, will you second the uncontested appointments as set out in the report?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I second that.
Thank you. Any member? No? Okay, to the vote. All those in favour of the uncontested appointments, please show. All those against, please show. The item is carried. We have received the following contested nominations for the member on Pennine Prospects: Councillor Cosima Townley and Councillor Scott Cunliffe. Members can vote once. All in favour of Councillor Cosima Townley, please show. Okay. All in favour of Councillor Scott Cunliffe, please show. Okay. Councillor Cosima Townley has been appointed as the member for Pennine Prospects. Item 7. Reports from committee chairs. Please can members note that for this item and the next one on strategic plan progress reports, members should not refer to named individuals or provide any details that may identify individuals or addresses when asking the questions or making any observations. Item 7A, scrutiny. Councillor Anne Royal, as Vice Chair of Scrutiny and in the absence of the Chair, will you move the report?
I will move the report, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Any member?
Does that need to be seconded?
No. Okay, thank you. We'll move on to item 7B. Audit and standards. Councillor Wajid Khan, will you move your report?
I move my report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any member? No. Okay, moving on to item 7C, licensing. Councillor Jeff Sumner, will you move your report?
Move my report, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sumner. Any member? Okay, move on to item 7D, development control. Councillor Saeed Chowdhury, will you move your report?
I move my report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any member? Thank you. We move on to item 8, strategic plan progress reports. I will take each report in order. I will ask for any questions on the report and the executive member will respond to one question at a time. The same procedure will then be followed for observations. Can I remind members with a question or observation to clearly quote the page number and the reference? Also, will members please be concise with their questions and observations? Leader, Councillor Fraser Banmore, will you move your report?
I move my report, Mr. Mayor.
Any questions? Councillor Townley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Page 116, PR1. In relation to the proposed works at Manchester Road to make access easier, which I applaud, but why is it we haven't been thinking about a simple pedestrian crossing with the appropriate safety measures that could have been put across there rather than a very expensive and an extremely long wait, I have to say, for a proposed bridge and lift? Thank you.
Councillor Anwar.
Thank you, Councillor Townley. The bridge that we're talking about is from one platform to the other, so the pedestrian crossing, I'm assuming you're talking about in terms of the access. So, but
Level crossing.
Yeah, the level crossing. Yeah, but what we're talking about here is the expense will be towards the bridge, so we can get from one platform to the other. So we're not having to. Those people who are travelling using the trains not having to go across and up that hill and down that big slope that's there at the moment. So, thank you.
Okay, no other questions have been indicated, so we'll move on to any observations for the leader. Councillor Gordon Lishman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to add another comment on the so-called Levelling Up Fund.
Can we have a page number and a reference?
Yes, I'm sorry. PR1, page 116, the same that Councillor Townley just referred to. I want to make 2 points. Firstly, that the overall approach to the so-called Levelling Up Fund is politically corrupt. And secondly, that the Levelling Up Fund bears very little relationship to what is actually needed for the economic development of this town or indeed for the whole of our region. These slugs of money come out from government from time to time, and there is a certain preference from time to time notable for the constituencies of people who are friends or who have lobbied government. This is the first time, however, that members of Parliament have had the need to endorse specific projects, and it is the first time that ministers personally have taken a series of decisions on the allocation of funding. In the first round of funding for so-called Levelling Up, 63% of the grants decided by government ministers went to constituencies with Conservative MPs. Now, this has taken the political approach to these issues to a level of shamelessness which we have not seen before. But even worse, I agree substantially with all the commentators, all the professional bodies who are saying, what's the plan? Where are the numbers? What are the targets? When you're talking about economic development, what are you intending to do in terms of overall employment? What are you intending to do in terms of overall wage rates? What are you intending to do to achieve greater productivity? What are you going to do to ensure that areas of the country which have been neglected and left behind for many years are actually enabled to improve their continuing economic situation? Now, this is a matter of numbers. I have a shelf at home which goes back to the North West Economic Planning Council's report of 1965. And on that shelf, time and time again, people are saying a small number of key things which are not represented by the Levelling Up Fund. The first of those is that you have to plan at a wider level than simply a town or even a city region. Going back to 1969, I've been looking at one of the things on my shelves, which is a report on the intermediate areas in 1969. It was submitted by Sir Joseph Hunt to government. What it says is that the special status which Merseyside has is something which disadvantages the rest of the region. How much more is that true when Greater Manchester and Merseyside have special powers, special money, special authority, and those of us who are just over the border from those areas do not get that support and are never likely to, because we don't have the scale and we don't have the organisation of city regions. But we're the ones who lose out, like County Durham. We're the people who are not getting the support from any coherent regional plan for economic development. And that's why we need an approach to the North West as a whole, which is looking at infrastructure, which is looking at industrial development, which is looking at the relationship between universities and new business, at technology and at innovation. Bits of money for Manchester Road Station or the canal side are not a coherent plan for economic development. They will do nothing in the North West to making a significant contribution to the levels of employment, the levels of economic activity, the levels of wages, and our future as a community here in Burnley and in the whole of our region. Levelling up is a political phrase. It's something that's said because it sounds good. What it isn't about is a coherent and crucially locally and regionally accountable system which can actually develop the economic development that we need in this region. And I really object to the language and the rhetoric which is used in this fund and in the rest of what is being said by government to suggest that they're going to achieve significant change in the future of an area like this by throwing occasional bits of money around.
Councillor Townley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, PR1, page 116, and I think that was a great argument for local government review, Councillor Lishman. Thank you. However, my point was actually making access to Manchester Road Station, which I think is key to some of the future development of Burnley, easier. What my point was really to the leader was that we already have a bridge. We might then get a lift, which of course would ease some passage. But mine is a much simpler solution, which is a level crossing, which would allow all of us to make our way along the flat from platform to platform. Thank you.
Councillor Anwar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, in response to Councillor Lishman, I can't disagree with a lot that he said this evening, except the bit where he said that Councillor Birtwistle was a good MP, but other than that, the rest of it's been pretty good. In terms of what he's just said with regards to levelling up, and is it levelling up? I can't disagree with him, because I think there are a lot of sound bites and they are buzzwords that are being used. Will it tackle overall employment, productivity, improve the economic situation for some of our deprived communities? I'm not sure it goes as far as doing that, but what I think that where we are, and in terms of this levelling up bid, is that we are in between a rock and a hard place. We do need support from the local MP. We do need to apply for this money, because round one is here now. We need to go for it, and if we don't, round two might not come around. And so we need to make sure that we bring this money into the town. So, as I said, we're in between a rock and a hard place, but I can't disagree with a lot of what Councillor Lishman has said. And in response to the observation made by Councillor Townley, apologies, I misunderstood her original question around the level crossing. But in terms of why we're having a bridge and why we're going for what we might have a lift and not a simpler solution, that is something I can get back to you on by speaking to your officers, but I'm sure there's a very good reason for going for that option. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hurt.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm someone that I actually use, PR1, page 116. I'm obviously somebody that has problems accessing a lot of places, and Manchester Road Station can be one of those. And I notice on here that there's actually absolutely no mention of actually getting to the station in the first place. That's a major issue for anybody with mobility issues, or anyone with young children, because it's actually a 1 mile walk or wheel in a wheelchair to use controlled crossing points to get from one side of Manchester Road to the other side of Manchester Road, or a risky dash across the drop curbs at the Manchester Road roundabout, whereby you try to wait for a space that can take 10 minutes between the traffic to actually try and get across with small children or in a very slow-moving wheelchair. And my observation is that I'm quite disappointed that there's nothing in there about passengers actually getting to the station, as well as actually getting from one platform to the other. And it does look like the executive are putting all their eggs in one basket and hoping that the planning application for a new supermarket comes off, because there are plans in there to add in a controlled crossing point. But really, this bid should have had some form of access across that road for members of the public who find it difficult to get across otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hurt. Councillor Onwar, do you want to respond to that observation?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, in response to that, I think it's important to note that the plans for Manchester Road Station, they link into wider plans that we've got in terms of the town centre master plan and other developments that will be taking place in the area. So we're going to see significant change in that part of the town. But Councillor Hurt raises a very valid point in terms of access, in terms of whether, for those making it more accessible for people to be able to access the train station, whether that's by public transport or those who are coming by other means. So that is something that I can, obviously it's not gone through, you know, in terms of it's not set in stone. So that is something that we can have a look at to see in terms of what we can do to improve that access. So thank you for that.
Councillor Hussain. Just wait till the microphone arrives, Councillor Hussain.
Thank you. And page 116 and PE1, it's with regards to youth mental health. And I just wanted to know if the council leader is aware that most of the Lancashire County Council youth and community
just observations.
Yeah,
don't pose questions.
It's
Yeah.
It's not a question, it's an observation. Most of Lancashire County Council youth and community services buildings are closed, and over the COVID lockdown, young people have suffered most with regards to mental health. Can the council leader write on behalf of Burnley Borough Council to ask when County Council will be opening up these community facilities for the community to use? Currently,
I think we just strayed into questions there,
okay,
Councillor
thank you, Mr.
Hussain.
Mayor.
So if you want to rephrase it, that's absolutely fine.
I would say if the council leader can write to LCC on behalf of this council to ensure community buildings such as youth and community centres are opened up as soon as possible as the lockdown definition by the government is over. Thank you.
Okay, let's try not to confuse questions and observations. I know it's been an issue for many years in this council. Councillor Anwar, do you want to respond?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just in response to that observation that was made by Councillor Hussain, I think it's important that we do recognise that the impact that the pandemic has had on the mental health of young people, but it's not just the pandemic. This was an issue for us in our local communities, and particularly it was something that was raised by our local high schools prior to the pandemic, which is why this council made an investment in supporting the posts that exist in our local schools, in our local high schools. With regards to the issue that we with LCC buildings, obviously that's when LCC open their buildings, that's a matter for LCC. But on behalf of and the request that's been made by Councillor Hussain, I can have a conversation with LCC colleagues. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Deputy Leader and Executive Member for Resources and Performance, Councillor Sue Graham, will you move your report?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd be happy to move my report. I just want to make one point, and that's about universal credit.
I apologise, Councillor Whittaker. We have actually moved on now. I apologise for that. It's one of those things, I think, and if I apologise just in the layout of the room, but I don't think anybody had spotted your hand up. And we're now at Councillor Graham's report. Thank you. Please go ahead, Councillor Graham.
Yeah, thank you. I think you have to wave your hand a bit more. Universal credit. A number of people in Burnley, a great number of people in Burnley receive universal credit, and this is due to be cut by £20 per week. That's £1,000 a year for somebody who's already in somewhat severe poverty. The uplift, that £20 a week, was intended to help working people deal with the impact of COVID on their jobs. These are working people. And that impact is still being felt. People's hours are being cut, they're being put onto 0 hours contracts. They're still technically working, but they don't have the same income as before. And yet they're having to face from September a £20 cut in their income. I think I'd just like to make that point and would like to think that Burnley Together might be even busier in the coming months than it already is now. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move my report.
Thank you, Councillor Graham. Any questions? Councillor Chamberlain.
It's purely an observation upon what Councillor Graham just said on about universal credit.
Are you going for a question or an observation?
No, it's an observation, and it's also to correct Councillor Graham.
Right, well, if it's an observation, you need to wait until we get to observations. Okay. Are there any member on questions? No? Okay. I think you can continue then, Mr. Chamberlain. We're now on to observations.
Thank you.
Councillor Chamberlain.
Councillor said it's for working people. It isn't. Credit is also for people on benefits, and the uplift was given to everyone. The reason it's being cut is because it's come to its natural end on there, and there are other things that are actually in place. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Graham, want to respond to that observation? You don't have to.
No, I'm happy to respond. These are people, whether they're on benefits or working, that are really on the poverty line, and losing £20 a week or £1,000 a year is going to have a severe detrimental impact on their lives. Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Executive Member for Health and Wellbeing, Councillor Margaret Lishman, will you please move your report?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move my report. I'd like to just point out in doing so the reason we're sitting in this room this evening and not in the council chamber is because we're still only part way through a pandemic. And if you look at the beginning of the report focuses on the fact that we are. You'll note the comments about testing, and you'll note the comments about the vaccination problem. There's still a large number of people, particularly in the younger age groups, that have not yet been vaccinated, and also people that have not received their second vaccination. We aren't out of the woods. We need to be, as councillors, setting examples. I'm sure that everybody in this room has had both their vaccinations. I hope so. And I'm sure that everybody, before they came here this evening, did a lateral flow test to make sure that they were safe to be able to come. It is vitally important, in order to manage this disease, that we take the precautions that are indicated. And that's why the beginning of the report focuses very heavily on the things that we can do and the things that the council are doing. And in answer to Councillor Graham's observation about Burnley Together, we are only too conscious in Burnley Together of the requirement to support our populations and the value that having a partnership approach is making to the way things are being done for the people who require our help the most in order for them to be able to live comfortably. The report I beg to move, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lishman. Any questions? Okay, Councillor Birtwistle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's page 121, PE4, relates to the coronavirus testing at the Methodist Church. Could I welcome this? It's been a very successful testing station. Could I ask the executive member if she could advise the council on what the times the testing station will continue to be open for? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Lishman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As Councillor Birtwistle says, an extremely useful facility. They do actually provide assisted lateral flow tests, and I'm sure those of you that have done it this evening yourselves know how difficult and horrible they are to do, but it is a necessary evil. So those that need assistance, it's available. It's available at the Central Methodist Church, 9 till 12 on Mondays, Wednesdays and Saturdays.
Thank you. Councillor Ferrier.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to refer to PL4, page 124, a question about trees. I've noticed there's a bit about putting a bid to the Forest Commission about planting trees on council, well, I assume it's council land. I'm just wondering, I assume there'll be an AS report with an AS map attached to it showing us exactly where to the council intends to plant these. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Lishman.
You'll see, I presume we're referring to the climate and biodiversity action. You'll see that it's a bid that's gone in. Once we know how successful we are with the bid, then we will be able to identify not only the sort of micro woodland areas that we're talking about, but also the primary schools that have agreed to have the orchards, which I think is a great use to see going forward. So I'm really hopeful that that bid's successful.
Thank you. We're doing well here with quick questions and quick answers. Long may it continue. Councillor Hurt.
Thank you, Mayor. The question, the Clifton Street area, it's PL4, page 124, and it's regarding parks and green spaces. The Clifton Street area has been neglected by multiple administrations, and their green space on Stonyholme Recreation Ground, known locally as the Clifton Street Rec, has been left to decay for years due to the designation as a future development plot since the 1990s. The pathway down to the wreck is in a dangerous condition with loose and broken flags, a broken handrail. The all-weather pitch lighting is mostly broken, and the field had not been mown in months until residents protested about plans to take their green space from them. Could Councillor Lishman please promise the residents of the Clifton Street area that the Coalition will not be selling this precious green space in an area noted to be deficient in both open green space and play areas to Burnley College or any other developer, and that all the green spaces will be protected and properly maintained for the residents of Burnley and Padiham to enjoy both now and in the future. Thank you.
Councillor Lishman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's a bit of a big ask to say to protect everything forever, and I certainly don't think I'm capable of promising that. What I can say in relation to Clifton Street is that I know officers and councillors have been talking to residents about what the future developments that the college want to put in might require, and also what we need to be doing to make life a lot more palatable for the residents in that particular area. My understanding at the moment is that the college are going to provide a mugger, which, for those that don't know, is a multi-use games area. And as well as providing football on it, it's going to have such things as netball nets, as I understand it. In addition to that, there's going to be fitness equipment, and grass games area will be guaranteed. There has to be some development, has been pointed out by Councillor Hurt. The area was designated as development. But what the council and officers have been trying to do is to come to an agreement with residents that provides much better facilities for them. I have already agreed that the play area there, when I went to look at it, I didn't think it was good enough, and we are going to put that on the playlist to be done this year rather than waiting. So yes, there may well have been neglect in the past, but we have pulled our socks up. Officers are well aware of what needs to be done, and actions are being taken. But I can't make a promise that we won't in the future develop other areas and have to move things around, because I haven't got a crystal ball, no more than anybody else that sits in this council chamber has. What I will promise is that we will continue to do the best for all of our residents in Burnley and Padiham.
Thank you. Councillor Townley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Page 121, PE4. Whilst very much appreciating these wonderful surrounds and thanking UCLAN for their kind hospitality, can I ask the executive member when the windows at the town hall will be opened so that we can return to our proper home?
Councillor Lishman.
I don't know the answer to that. I think we're going to have to just wait and see how this latest surge of coronavirus affects the town. The infection rates are still rising, so I think the council has quite rightly decided on caution in the first instance. And I, like you, very much want to get back into that council chamber, but I want to be safe when we do so.
Thank you. Councillor Hussain.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And page 122, it's at the top. It's regarding the vaccination programme. I just want to ask the council and the exec member, what is the council doing in terms of increasing the vaccination take-up within the borough? It seems that we're just falling behind with regards to regional averages. And what proactive actions are you taking to promote vaccination throughout the borough, in particularly amongst young people?
Thank you. Councillor Lishman, we're keeping Diane very fit here, running up and down these stairs.
If she's doing a step count, she's streets ahead by now. Thank you, Councillor Hussain, a good question. As I'm sure you appreciate, the Director of Public Health leads in how we manage the process. And I know that Councillor Anwar has regular briefings through the network about how we're going to approach things. I do know that we've done various initiatives like taking the vaccination bus to Boohoo to encourage people working there. We've also been cited at various mosques, and we've also been cited at various community centres. There's also been quite a large Facebook campaign with councillors and other people promoting the way forward. There is a very clear resistance amongst some of the younger people who've believed the nonsense that they've seen on other sources of information about such things as if you get vaccinated, you won't be fertile. Quite how that works, I haven't worked out yet, but there you go. So we just have to keep pushing at this, and I think it's the duty of all of us to talk to our children and our children's children about the value of it. We don't have smallpox because of vaccination, and I think that is the strongest message to put out to everybody at the moment.
Thank you. Councillor Fewings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Page 124, but the reference is PL4 on page 122. It's in relation to the play area improvement programme. I've got two questions. The first one, and I would be happy for the executive member to come back to me, because I think they're the third executive member I've asked this question to in as many years, which is, please can you confirm as part of the play strategy that you're not going to close Jesse's Park on Piccadilly Road? Thank you. And then the second question is, would the executive member join me in thanking the residents of Clifton Street for their energy and enthusiasm and bringing all the issues to the fore, because I think it has really been a residents-led programme. There's been some amazing parties on the Rec that have made the press, and it's been a really great community spirit between the residents of Clifton Street and the residents of Stonyholme. I do also want to just also ask that when the executive member was responding to Councillor Hurd, it seemed to be like the decision had already been made to sell the land to the college, and the college was providing this and the college was providing that. I know there were ongoing conversations, which I've been part of, but I had been assured that there was an actual consultation happening and a decision hadn't been made yet, and that wasn't going to be made till August. So could I just have a clarification as to whether the decision has now been made? Thank you.
Councillor Lishman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The decision hasn't been made. I apologise if I gave you the wrong impression. I was trying to give the impression that there'd been a detailed consultation with residents and what were their priorities and what the college were offering as part of the negotiation. But no, a decision has not yet been made. And you rightly say the residents have got going. It's great when residents finally see the need to actually start to do something when they have problems. And it's reminds me of the bit like the local plan that we don't get much feedback on the local plan, but as soon as you get a planning application that affects people, then they all come running out, and because it affects them. So I suppose it's a lesson for us as a council. How do you mobilise them when it's not a detrimental effect in making them do so? But yes, as a Liberal Democrat, I'm firmly in favour of involving people and would thank any resident that gave me the time of day to have that conversation. With regard to Jessie's Park, yes, I am aware of it. I'm not sure what the decision that's been made about it. I've certainly looked at it and also considered its usage. But I will have to get back to you with a more detailed discussion.
Okay, I have two more who want to pose questions. I won't be taking any more questions after that, so we'll take Councillor Wadji Khan first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Page 121, PE4. Councillor Burtwhistle touched on the testing site at Methodist Church. Councillor Lishman, do you agree with me, first of all those councillors that were volunteered over the last 18 months are true heroes, because it's not in their council role duty. I'm talking about yourself as well as Councillor Burtwhistle, Councillor Harbour, Councillor Emo, and Councillor Townley. A second point is, do you also agree with me, Councillor Ishman, that this testing, the amount of efforts people have done, and you mentioned surge, and isn't that surge, as we are seeing now, because of the Delta variant or Johnson variant, because of this catastrophic decision of not putting India on the red list earlier because we were trying to pursue a trade deal? Can I ask you for your reflections on that particular point? And do you agree the number of U-turns and the decisions by this Prime Minister has caused problems in terms of the rise of cases, hospitalisations, ultimately has to bear the responsibility that people and residents of Burnley have suffered as a result of this Prime Minister's decisions, dithering and delay? Thank you.
Councillor Lishman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not sure I want to thank myself. I think all of us that volunteered as councillors have thoroughly enjoyed ourselves doing it. It's been a great experience, and I know that some of us have already been contacted to see if we'll do some more and to also see if we'll take part in the next stage, which would be in September, when there'll be probably another round of vaccinations, including flu. And so I would urge all councillors to volunteer. It's a great experience. I've discovered that I don't recognise half the people I see when they're wearing face masks, because people come up to me afterwards and say, "Oh, I saw you at St. Peter's," and I say, "Did you?" Because I don't recognise. With regard to the Delta variant, yes, I think there's an element of hindsight being a wonderful thing. But yes, there have been mistakes, and I think there is an element where politics sometimes takes over from public health and from the requirements of health. I think there are a lot of lessons to be learnt from this pandemic. But yes, there have been U-turns. I think the one that struck me the most was we're not having to self-isolate after Sanjay Javid got COVID marked. I don't know whether he's actually got it or not, I can't remember. But we're not going to have to self-isolate because we've joined a test scheme. And then within an incredibly short time, there was a turnaround, 2 hours, I'm informed, that they decided they did have to self-isolate. And I think there's a lesson, maybe, not a criticism, but a lesson that you need to think a little bit maybe further before you make decisions. There are a lot of lessons from this pandemic. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Chamberlain.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As a new councillor, I don't know whether this would be relevant, but it's PL4, page 124. It's about the play area improvement programme. would there be a possibility for the play park up on Rose Hill, off Robney Avenue and the junction of Moorland Road to be looked at? Currently, it's waiting for repairs that I've reported, and the parts for it are taking an inordinately long time to come. But there has been questions asked by local residents to have that improved, so it includes the older children as well, because there's an outcry up there that there isn't anything there for them. Thank you.
Thank you. And this is the final question. Councillor Lishman.
I'm delighted to hear it. I think in answer to that, I think the best thing to do is if we can have a conversation with Simon Goff and his team about what can be done about it is probably the best way forward. So perhaps if you'd send me an email to remind me, because I'm dreadful, and I will make sure that happens. Okay?
Thank you. You might be surprised to know to get to observations yet. So, but observations. Okay, I'll start with Councillor Hussain.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And page 124 and also page 122. The question I asked with regards to vaccination, and I think Councillor Khan or Lord Khan has touched upon it. I think there's been various mixed messages coming from central government, and that's had an effect in terms of people taking up vaccination. And I would welcome everybody to promote that vaccination, encourage, especially amongst young people, to take up the offer. And like the executive member said, there is myths surrounding such as being fertile and things like that. So I wondered if the council could put out some leaflets with myth-busting information that can go out. And I think that would be a good way to move forward. And with regards to Stonyholm Recreation Ground, it's not Clifford Street Recreation Ground, it is Stonyholm Recreation Ground. And I just wanted to report, I think there's some mixed messages. And some of the community residents that I've spoken to welcome the plans that Burnley College are doing. They feel that the wider borough and beyond that as well will benefit from the facilities that will open up. I think the college have been late in terms of not engaging with the community, and I think they've recognised that. And since then, they are doing what they can in terms of engaging with the local community down there. But I'd agree with the exec member. I think it would bring in facilities and other educational sort of resources that this borough needs. And I think it will benefit not just residents or community around the college, but borough-wide and even Lancashire-wide. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hussain. I'm going to move to Councillor Townley, if that's all right, Councillor Lishman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Page 121, PE4. Just quickly, thank you, Lord Khan. We appreciate being a sounding board, but I somehow think that your latest oration would have been better served in the esteemed chamber from which you have no doubt rushed. As far as my original question to the executive member, bearing in mind that Restoration UK are still in the town hall, could we not inquire whether the windows that can be opened will be opened? I have no doubt that they have been painted up for many decades, but this is the opportunity to open up what should be open.
I think there was a partial question in there, but I didn't have a microphone to stop it. So, Councillor, do you want to take all three together? Or get Councillor Gordon Lishman observation.
Well, I always think executive members should be thoroughly interrogated. I should say, one of the points which makes you realise you're really getting old is when all your children have already been double vaccinated because they meet the age criteria. I want to make a point related to vaccination, as people have said, PE4, page 121, that came out of the scrutiny discussion particularly. One thing that was noticeable about the first stage of the vaccination process was that a lot of older people who might have been less willing than others to be vaccinated suddenly realised that it was urgent and that they needed to, and that it was very much in their own interests. One point which has not been made effectively to many younger people yet is about the risk to them. The risk of long COVID will affect a significantly smaller proportion of the population than COVID has with the older population. But a small proportion of a large population is still a larger number of people. And young people can be putting themselves very much at risk if they take the sort of behaviour which makes them liable for infection. I have one young friend who is now in his second year of long COVID, no underlying health condition, no extra problem, still quite young. He's now lost his job. He has not spent more than an hour or two out of bed over the course of more than a year. And I think it's important to get the point home to younger people that they are running themselves a real risk of a disease which will have significant and life-changing properties.
Yeah, thank you. Take those three, Councillor Ishman. I believe there's at least one more afterwards, so that's okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really don't have any comments back other than to thank those that have made the observations. I agree entirely with regard to the mixed messages. We have put stuff out on Facebook, I know, but if people can think of other ways that we can try and do the myth busting, then that would be great. Councillor Townley, I think it's Councillor Graham's portfolio, and she's nodding, and we will do our best to make sure windows open safely, obviously, because we have to make sure that nobody can jump out of them. And long COVID, well, some of us might want to at some point. Long COVID is a really serious problem. The Burnley Together group had a presentation with regards to trying to put together plans to provide a service for long COVID. But long COVID can present in so many different ways that we haven't yet really worked through, that it's difficult at the moment. So I think it's something that is going to be of note that we need to address within our community. I think that covers those three.
Thank you. Councillor Fewings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The first one's page 121, PE4. It's just to add my thanks really to the volunteers for the vaccination programme, and also thank the executive member for not listing councillors in the chamber who helped out and ignoring some of them. The second observation is page 124, and it's PL4 in relation to Clifton Street again. Essentially, there's been a little bit of a narrative here that the residents are against the college, and that's not actually come across in any of the negotiations that have actually happened between the residents and the councils for the areas. So I just want to make it very clear that they're not against the college. They just are against taking the green space when there's space next to the college that could be taken instead, and understand that the consultation is open and they're well within their rights to make representations in that respect. So I hope people agree that having a consultation about things is a good thing. And the final point on that is that we had some speeches, including speeches from the party that the executive member is from, saying that in light of what's happening in the world, we need to reconsider some of the things that we've decided. because of safe floods in Germany. So making a decision in 1990 to build on that land doesn't mean that's a sound decision today, and I would endorse the comments at the beginning of this meeting that really you should think again as to whether what you decided in 1990 is applicable today. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Lishman.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think I'll simply note Councillor Fewing's comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lishman. That was an extensive examination of your portfolio, for sure. Right. To make sure that we don't run out of time this evening, I propose that we have a motion to extend the meeting to the duration of business. I will move that motion. Deputy Mayor.
I will second that motion, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Any member? It's a It is. It's a motion to suspend standing orders and extend the meeting for the duration that we need to conduct tonight's business for the avoidance of any doubt. Any member? Councillor Fewings?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll just refer to my comments at the beginning of the meeting, how often you suspend standing orders when it suits the purposes, for the same reasons that I've highlighted many times before. Extending meetings last minute disproportionately affects women, parents and disabled people. Please stop doing it.
Okay, we're still under any member. Councillor Graham?
Yes, Councillor Fewings, I'm sure you've got my best interests at heart, but it doesn't affect me unduly to stay for a little bit longer. The reason this meeting is carrying on so long is because of all the shenanigans at the beginning of the meeting. So I'm happy to support that we move standing orders. Thank you.
Councillor Townley?
As one of those women, I wish you would not keep appropriating what I will and won't and can't do.
Any other member? Okay, we'll move to the vote. All those in favour of an extension of the meeting, please show. All those against? The motion is carried. Okay, moving on to Executive Member for Housing and Development Control. Councillor John Harbour, will you please move your report?
I'll move my report, Mr Mayor.
Any questions? Councillor Birtwistle.
Just one question, Mr Mayor. It's PL3 on page 128. It starts on 127. Councillor Harbour is aware of the question. It relates to number 27 Cleaver Street. Councillor Harbour...
Just a second. I did say at the beginning of this section that we shouldn't really be referring to individuals or specific addresses. So I would appreciate it if you could make it a bit more of a general question rather than being specific to one property that could identify individuals. Thank you.
Sorry, Mr Mayor. I don't really know how to do it. Could the officer, could the relevant executive member answer a question I gave to him earlier regarding the condition of a specific property that is causing hassle and problems to the neighbouring properties? This property has been, he is aware of this property. It's been going on for many, many years, and the adjoining properties, the value of those properties is collapsing because both of the neighbours would like to sell and move, but it has the quality of the one that's creating the problem is making it very difficult for them. I apologise for stating the address, but it's very, very difficult to do it without doing that. But the executive member knows what the address is, so if he can answer in the terms of when will this particular address be sorted out. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Birtwistle. Councillor Harbour.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As Councillor Birtwistle states, I do know this address, and it's been around too long, if I'm being honest with you. But as far as the council's concerned, we've done everything we can now. Colleagues will know that when it comes to putting properties forward for compulsory purchase, there are strict guidelines we have to follow and rules. And some property owners are aware of that, and they sort of make it awkward for us to do what we want to do for residents in those areas. But this property now is actually on our list. It's gone down to the Secretary of State, and unfortunately the Secretary of State's department are going to a public inquiry about it. And I understand that that's where the hold-up is now. There's nothing this council can do. What we have done, and we're limited in what we can do, we have contacted that department and asked them, could they speed things up a little bit? But I'm sure colleagues will be aware of the recent pandemic, well, I say recent pandemic, the way things have been recently, it's held everything up there. But rest assured, all that information, that property, everything's down there now, and we're just waiting for an answer coming back from them. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Hosker.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I ask Councillor Harbour, in his role as an executive, what the rules are on restricted licensing? Is it, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong here, elected member, but when people pay, is it a bond they pay or is it a deposit? That's the first question. Second question, on areas of selected licensing, do these properties ever get inspected? Or do you just wait for complaints? Thirdly, the question is to you. I can't go into street names because our mayor's just said we can't mention street names, which is fine. But I've got areas in Padiham, which you're Lord Councillor, by the way, which are phoning me up with antisocial behaviour problems and saying you're doing nothing about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harbour.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. There were three questions there, but I've got to be honest with you, Mr. Mayor. I'm having trouble trying to find an answer to them. He talks about properties in a selective licensing area regarding bonds or deposit. Whatever the landlord, you know, some cases there might be a bond, some cases they might have to put a deposit on. But if somebody's really struggling in any areas, and it depends on how much they are struggling, sometimes we can come to an agreement with a bond. But in the majority of cases, residents who do know and who do select to go into the private sector for renting know what's required of them. The other two issues regarding Padiham and antisocial behaviour, whether you're in a selective licence area or not, there's opportunities there to report antisocial behaviour. It doesn't have to be in a selective licensing area. So I'm hoping I've covered the 3 points Councillor Oscar's raised. If I haven't, Mr. Mayor, I'm not just sure how you want to proceed this, but I can either talk to him afterwards or he might try and get round it in an observation. I don't know. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I've no other... Oh, yes, I have. Councillor Gordon-Lishman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was going to ask the executive member, after saying that I appreciate the difficulties he has with the Secretary of State for Local Government and his department, but I wondered if he would like to take the opportunity to welcome the statement by the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government last week at the LGA conference, where he made clear that he and his government were going to row back substantially on their original proposals to change planning in the lines that were discussed by our earlier motion. And will he join me in welcoming that decision that the Secretary of State is not intending to proceed? And in particular, will he, like me, wait with interest to see the development of the views of the Conservative group on this council when it becomes clear that that is happening.
Councillor Harbour.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's not often I disagree with Councillor Lishman, but I've got to be honest with you, until I've actually seen that, I can't really say that, yes, I agree with him. But I do agree with the sentiments he's expressed. And also referring to the discussions we had earlier, when the Greens made the motion about the planning reform, I forgot to mention at the time, and I'll take the opportunity now because Councillor Ishham's given me that opportunity, there were many, many, many Tory MPs who were against these reforms as well. And I should have said that earlier. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. No more questions, so we're on to observations. Are there any observations? Councillor Hosker.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I find Councillor Harbour's response unhelpful. In fact, useless.
Councillor Harbour, do you wish to respond to that observation?
I can understand Councillor Oscar saying that the response might have been unhelpful, and I'm always happy to either discuss it with him after the meeting or just try and find out what he actually meant when he asked those three questions. As regards being useless, I think it speaks for itself. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. There are no more observations, so we'll move on to the Executive Member for Community and Environment, Councillor B. Foster. Will you please move your report?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm happy to move my report. Thank you.
Any questions? Councillor Townley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. PL1, page 130. It was really to ask the exec member if I could have an update following the meeting we had about a month ago with regard to partnerships for environmental protection. Thank you, i.e. fly tipping.
Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah. I presume you're thinking about the urban and rural fly tipping. That's what you're talking about. Can I just update you by saying that one of the officers has now procured some solar panelled cameras that can be displayed in rural areas and is shortly going to start trialling these and I will ensure that they have a conversation with you. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Ferrier.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I refer to PL1, page 131, on the electric vehicle charging points. So you're installing 4 rapid charge points. Just confirm, is that the faster 50 kilowatt version? Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Foster.
I think there is a mixture of them. I'm not up to date with all of the different, are they called wattages or whatever sort of thing, whatever it is. But there is a mixture of them that is going in because I believe it's being updated all of the time. So the people who have responsibility for it, the officers, are keeping updated and ensuring wherever we put them in, they are the latest that we can possibly have. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Hosker.
Yeah, I'll see if I get better joy this time. PL1, 130. Councillor Foster, fly tipping issues. We mentioned fly tipping issues. As you will know, come from Upton, Mill Hill Lane's been a main drop-off point for most of these fly tippers. What are we doing about it? It's getting a regular thing, and it's not just a fly tip, it's not minor. You're talking off a wagging full. What I'd like to suggest to you tonight is, because you know Upton well, where the motorway bridge goes over, when you go for Upton Roads up at Fordies, and when you go up at Motorway Bridge, there's a camera there, and I think it belongs to Hyman Council. I was just wondering, as a council, could we maybe talk to Hyman Council and maybe use it between Burma Council and see if we can go to? It may help some of these flighters what are thing. And the last question for you, Councillor Foster. When you've got somebody repeating offenders, we're not going to mention addresses, like we said, but when you get somebody, a tenant, who's continuously having our teams picking up their mess, I'm on about bin bags, not tied up, owned, I'm talking 9, 10 bags a time, all over. And they've been there before, they've been warned before, they've had fines before, and yet it's repeating happening. Can you tell us what we do about that? It continues. I'm going on, I'm going to meeting to somebody, what is he called, Tom Ormond tomorrow, and his team, because there's rats involved. It's that bad. Thank you.
Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. First of all, under the fly tipping, what you want us to do, of course, I do know Hapton well. For why Councillor Oscar said that is where I live, Hapton, so I know it very well, what he's talking about. When I answered Councillor Townley, when we had the meeting with Councillor Townley, looking at a particularly rural tipping, Mill Hill Lane was mentioned as another hotspot. And so I am sure that these cameras that we've got, when we're trialling them, Mill Hill Lane will be at the top. But the suggestion about Hyndburn, I don't know where we go with that, but I will inquire whether that is a possibility. The fly tipping, of course, is a much bigger challenge for us because it does happen in a number of areas and there is a lot of concern around it. And we have regular conversations around the different areas that are hotspots where fly tipping is, and are looking at lots of different strategies to try to help. As you'll see in the report, one of them is really to work with selecting licensing teams about responsibilities of both the tenants and the selective licensing teams. So we are doing as much as we can. Be assured, and I'd like to assure all councillors here, that we are seeing this as a very high priority, and we are trying to do, and if anybody has any suggestions that will help us, then please just get in touch with me. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. I believe that concludes questions. So now we're on to observations. Any observations? Start with Councillor Margaret Lishman.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm delighted to hear that we've got solar-powered cameras coming out. We have certain areas in Briarcliff Ward which are very much favourites with fly tippers, and I would hope that as part of the work that goes on to see if they work, that we're involved in that experiment as well. They're always extremely good in street scene, that when we do notify them that we've had tipping, they do come out straight away. That was particularly wonderful when somebody kindly tipped about a ton of dead chickens. Not that far away from Mr Mayor's property, actually. So it would be nice to have access to cameras where we could actually start to get some of these individuals. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Foster.
Just to reassure Councillor Lishman that in our meeting that was mentioned as well as a hotspot, so it is up there. Thank you.
I can't possibly comment on that, so Councillor Townley.
He dumped it. Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just to thank Councillor Foster and the team that came to the meeting. I think we can make this a thoroughly cross-party, cross-borough project, and let us hope we drive the fly tippers elsewhere. I'm sorry to say elsewhere, but if we can sort our problem out,
then it's someone else's turn to sort it out on their side, and let's get on with it. Thank you.
Councillor Foster, do you wish to respond to that?
Well, just to say that the way forward is about working together, because it is a huge challenge for us here in Burnley, fly tipping, and I know that all of us would want to ensure that that is resolved as quickly as possible.
Thank you. That completes that report. Executive Member for Economy and Growth, Councillor Asif Raja, will you please move your report?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I move my report, and in doing so, I would like to thank everyone for their patience on the Lower St James Street REM works. Lower St James Street is now fully open to pedestrians, and traffic is now flowing both ways. The area already looks really good, and there are still some improvements to be made to the shops along St James Street. I would also like to thank all the officers who have been working tirelessly over the last 12 months, seeking and submitting applications for various grants that would help local businesses, local infrastructure, and the people of Burnley. I really appreciate the work they have put into these applications and bids. So I move my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Raja. Questions? Councillor Commis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Raja. Could I just ask, in regards to page 135, PR2, and this is the Burnley Lifestyle magazine, of which apparently 20,000 copies are printed. Could you give me a net cost for that, and could you let me know of any monitoring that you do to gauge the effectiveness in bringing either tourists or businesses to the town? Thank you.
Councillor Raja.
Thank you, Councillor Commis. Unfortunately, I don't have that information present at the minute. If you like the figures, I'm sure we could get that information for you, and also we can look into finding out what sort of responses we've had with the distribution of these magazines. Thank you.
Okay, doesn't look to be any further questions, so move on to observations. Are there any observations? No? Okay. Item number 9, questions.
None have been received, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Item number 10, exclusion of the public. Councillor Fraser Banwar, will you move a motion to exclude the public from item 11 as per the agenda?
I move, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Sue Graham, will you second the motion?
I second the motion.
Any member? Go to the vote. All those in favour, please show. Against the motion? The motion is carried. So we'll just wait until everybody leaves.
Switch the speed. Is the feed?
There's a feed off.